Hey, this is Julie at Love's Beginning with a talk called Essential to Your Happiness. And the first idea I was given was I'm really good at this, and I'm going to hurt someone with this are the same vibration. So I think it was the last talk I did. I talked about the reintegration of the word vibration, how I didn't use it for a while because I had to be shown how you can't ever look at somebody else and think you know their vibration. But feeling is useful. And here's another thing I'm noticing being taught. And the ego gets very insulted about this. There's a back and forth continuum of emotion, obviously, but the obvious becomes obvious to me as I go along, kind of hits me over the head. And I think, well, I should have seen this a long time ago, but the whole thing is false. All the positive, all the negative, it's what keeps you going in the back and forth. And I've said this before, I've said the words, I thought I got it, but I just feel like I get this at a new level. So the purpose of feeling is not to rely on the feeling. The purpose of the feeling is to understand this is the indicator of my attachment to ego, both positive and negative. Because there's a positive that feels more like satisfaction. I dominated, I got what I want, somebody's satisfying me, somebody's approving of me. I, as a separate one, am getting what I want. And then we call that positive. Or if we look at somebody else positively, I approve of them, they're pleasing to me, they're falling in line with what I want, they represent a goal that I want to strive to get to, or the negative, that would be the jealousy or the trying to tear someone down. It's all the same thing. But the vibration of how that tug back and forth feels from false positive to negative, it's like negative, negative, it's all the same thing. There's that, and then there's what's prior to all that. What's everyone's true nature without exception. Goodness without opposite. No matter what I seem to be seeing, no matter what I seem to be experiencing. I'm going to get around to that first statement. I know I'm not addressing it directly, but this morning I had an experience where I was on that emotional continuum, and the temptation was there to try to make sure there would be justice in some form. Sorry, just getting a sip of tea. My microphone that I usually use seemed to have been disassembled and broken. And the ego is telling me a victim story, an anger story, and trying to pay. It was obviously a child. Which child did it? And trying to picture how they did it, and trying to accuse, and definitely trying to make a victim of me. Something has been taken from me. It's like something is. The state of the microphone was kind of funny because when I thought, well, I'll put it back together. It was kind of loose and unscrewed, not all the parts taken apart, but I thought I'll put it back to, make it tight again and just see if it works. There was something loose in there, though. I could hear when I moved it. There was a part that was not attached. Anyhow, I thought, well, I'll just give it a trial. I'll give it a test. So when I went to go to the switch, there was no switch. The whole guts of it had been moved out of alignment. There was no switch anymore. Maybe that was the part that was rattling around in there. And oh my gosh, did the anger and victimization kick up at this point. Not only did some they mess it up, they messed it up entirely beyond all repair, which may or may not be true. But now I can look at it and laugh and see the ego sends me a whole series of thoughts, and I can always turn to all things work together for good. I'm not likely to switch my microphone if it's a better idea for me to switch that out. And right now I'm using a microphone that's just been sitting down here that my son didn't like, so I switched to that one. Maybe that's been the one I should use all along. Who knows? The one I was using I thought was the better one, but when I looked them up online, they seem pretty comparable. So maybe I just needed that nudge to use a different microphone. Who knows? But all things work together for good. So ego's feeding me these thoughts, and boy, the identification as the aggrieved party, it seems so real and yet so disturbing. Like, this is not right. Something's very much going wrong here. I gotta stop and let myself get set straight about this. So I feel like I've allowed Sandy to return, and I don't know what that had to do with this first statement, but maybe it'll become clear to me. So again, the first statement was, I'm really good at this and I'm going to hurt someone with this, are the same vibration. And yeah, I was saying in the other talk, I was saying how vibration as a word had gotten taken away from me for a while so it could be redefined. And I could see it's this, you can sense this, either you're at peace or you're not. It's a binary. And there's a back and forth emotion of ego, and both ends of that stick, the seemingly positive and the seemingly negative, are both attachment to disturbance, attachment to chaos, attachment to the unstable back and forth, attachment to the changeable, attachment to ego being in charge. So if I think I'm really good at this, whatever the this is, then ego has an opportunity to make it into an identity and to take it over and to use whatever this is for its own ends. And if you get approval for doing that, there can be satisfaction in that comparative identity. It's an identity that can be compared favorably or unfavorably. Ego doesn't even care which, to another identity. If something bad happens, that magnifies ego. That's not a bad thing to ego. So, just seeing that I'm really good at this and I'm going to hurt someone with this, like being afraid of hurting someone. That's the same thing. It's the same thing going on. And to understand, we may have skills and abilities, and if we allow those to get used by that which is truly what we are, that disturbance of having a goal to use the ability to extract the approval of others, we don't need that goal. Spirit can pick up and use any skill and ability we have without that disturbance, without any goals. I'm still finding my way with this because it can be easy to toggle over into what we're used to, trying to extract love and approval from a world, from persons, and believing one is satisfied when one has gotten what the ego calls love, which is, attention, or you're so special, or something like that. So yeah, always something to be aware of, always something to notice, always something to drop when I notice it. Very common thought of ego is, I want to keep things in place. So there is peace, that is spirit. There is peace, that is the true nature of everyone and everything we encounter. Even if there's so much fiction on top contradicting that, there's goodness without opposite. There's peace without opposite. But then there's the ego saying, I, as a separate one, am the one who can keep things stable by avoiding things or by acquiring or arranging things. I want to keep things in place. And there are many, many thoughts I hear along these lines about ego maintaining the stability it believes it needs. And I'm learning to be discerning, learning to hear these thoughts and recognize this is fear. This is what would cover up the flow that's here for everybody. This is obscuring. This is not my safety. This is not what I want to lean on. So it's like a whole set of thoughts I didn't recognize very deeply were not serving me. Those are floating up to the top. Let's see. Judging requires a judgment scale, and you are accustomed to putting things on that scale, on the continuum, from this extreme to that extreme. And ego would send thoughts about, well, once you have judged something, now you can deal with it. So first you have to judge it, and then continue to judge it on an ongoing basis, and then you can respond to it. Spirit doesn't have us do the judgment part. Spirit just provides any response that's needed. So I'm noticing that one is effortful and defensive and hyper vigilant, and the other is just here. It's just given. One feels much easier than the other one. Okay, so a helpful reminder is God's gifts belong to all equally. So the gifts from God, that's just our true nature. The true nature that has to be shared. It cannot belong to one and not another. And you could use many names for this. You could use peace. You could use joy. You could use happiness. You could use love. You could use light, grace, truth. It's all the shared nature. And when we drop our commitment to seeing differences, not that we have to deny the differences that we observe and pretend, we're not seeing that form of illusion, but illusion is illusion. So in that, it is all the same. There are highs and lows and ups and downs and lefts and rights in illusion, and to the extent that we're attached to it, Spirit will use it to help bring us out of it. But that doesn't mean that we can't recognize illusion as all of one piece. And the true gifts that we have belong to all equally right now. So to think about particular gifts can be an attachment. I have to be careful how I go here. An attachment to egoic judgment. That's what I've come to realize. It's hard for me to put it in words. It's thinking about the gifts different people seem to possess. I understand I can't even make that judgment. It's like I hear the judgments rolling in, and they sound positive, but there's this feeling of tension underlying them that I hadn't noticed before. Whereas if I am willing to notice what is actual and not visible and detectable with the senses, what is actual, what's present, which is different from what I'm physically seeing, analyzing, judging, the pieces there. So God's gifts belong to all equally. Looking through the surface of, these characters who have assumed these roles of one is the destroyer of the microphone and one is the victim, having had her microphone destroyed. Looking underneath the surface of that drama and seeing all are equally gifted with the same nature right now, but I have to look underneath the drama. And to look underneath the drama is to look underneath the comparative nature of right doing and wrong doing as analyzed by ego. Because if I'm not seeing all as one piece or all is equally worthy, I'm lost again. I can't remember who I am, and I'm going to be leaning on ego's comparisons, which I understand now are not my friends, not anybody's friends. Okay, it's essential to your happiness to see all as having equal access to God's gifts right now. Otherwise, you have attached, I typed in pasta to separate people, and you have lost sight of the being. Must be the past. You have attached the past to separate people and have lost sight of the being. So the being is always here. The being is changeless. And the being doesn't have particular skills and abilities. However, the persons present, each with their various skills and abilities. Some seem to have many, some seem to have few or none. But to look through the surface of that and to see we all have equal access to God's gifts right now. That's to look at what doesn't change. And where does peace come from? Peace comes from recognizing what's real and being able to look through what is unreal, not attached to it. So this distinction is being made for me. I'm not sure where it's going, because I think Ika would rush in and fearfully proclaim, like, you don't want to overlook anyone's gifts. But it sounds fearful when it comes in and says that. So that means, okay, what I've been being told about this, I think I can rely on. There's something to see through here. There's something to detach from. So I'm not entirely clear on it, but I do feel led through it, and I will trust that. So hope everything's going well for you, and happy healing.